What's up, Lego builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios for episode 2 of Building the Battle of Jabiim in Lego. Last week was a lot of planning, a lot of recapping, a lot of sharing my vision and plan with you guys. So I'm sure you guys, and myself included, are ready for some actual building. And that's what's going to be happening in this episode. I'm going to lay out the actual base structure of the mock. Because this is freeform, I've got to actually put it together and figure out what shape I want to capture with Jabiim. It's good. I'm excited. I'm glad I'm finally doing this because this is one thing that I've kind of been putting off a little bit. I probably should have started it last week, but I honestly just didn't want to do it. So I'm glad to be starting out this week by doing that. That way I anticipate future updates going smoother. And once I get that kind of hard part out of the way, I'll be a little bit more excited to work on the mock. If you guys are excited to see what Jabiim looks like and watch me put together a freeform mock, don't forget to execute Order 66 on that like button. And if you're new to the channel watching for the first time, consider subscribing and tapping that bell so you will be notified the second Jabiim episode 3 gets announced. All that being said, let's hit the build. As I was laying out this mock, I realized it's going to be much bigger than I anticipated. Honestly, don't know why. I guess sometimes I just have trouble gauging the size of things, but this is going to be a very big mock. Pretty close to 2 base plates wide and pretty close to 3 base plates long. One thing I totally spaced on and didn't realize till I was putting these base plates down is the front and the back are very flat. And so I'm going to need to add some wedge plates to both those sides to kind of make them look a little bit more rounded and just less flat. I don't want this to look like a square. I want it to look like some kind of, oval-like, more natural looking structure. The rough layout's done, and I got the edges all finished up with some wedge plate. Like I said in the time lapse, I tried to round off some areas and rough some of these straight edges up, but I did end up with a couple. I've got one right there and then one over here. This is my main one that I'm concerned with because this over here, if you remember, is actually going to be a ravine. And then we're going to have the rock wall right here kind of slope up to where the main action is happening. So this I'm probably just going to have it like fade off looking like some kind of ditch bed or something like that. I'm really happy to have this all plated out and connected because now I can really figure out how big everything's going to be as far as like the base, the buildings, the ravine. Because you remember I wanted to include I wanted to include an ATTE in this mock. Honestly, I don't know if that's going to happen at this point now that I'm looking at this, just because an ATTE would take up so much of this space and I still need to have that main building area where the base is. And I feel like I'd rather have the base be proportioned correctly than have a tiny base just so I can include the ATTE, which is unfortunate because I was really excited to include that. So what I think I might do instead is maybe include a hover tank, just some kind of like heavy vehicle right there to help provide a little bit of support for the Republic troops. That being said, this is definitely going to be my largest freeform mock ever. I think Geonosis was maybe like that big, so this is going to be fun. It'll be interesting to see how I go about building this up and doing freeform plus tall rock walls. Typically you just have one row of plate and bricks down here and then you go up onto the terrain with freeform. You don't often see these tall rock walls. But that's actually what I'm going to do next, is just start working on the rock walls. I'm trying to decide how I want to go about doing this, if I want to start in one section and build up super high, or kind of go around the entire base of the mock and then slowly build the whole thing up at once. I think I'll probably do a little bit of combination of both. When I did Utapau and Keto Namoria, I like to build it in patches, so I do like a big section. Because if you're building up at the same level the whole way, it's kind of hard to envision what's going to come next, whereas if you kind of build in one spot and then look at that spot and then kind of continue that pattern, that tall pattern across the sections of the mock, it helps you know what each section of the rock wall is going to look like and like what slopes to put on top of each other to get the correct shapes. I hope that makes sense. A lot of the stuff makes sense in my mind and then I try and say it and it doesn't. I did have another thing I wanted to show you, and that is a new idea for the Nimbus Commando helmet. So this is actually just a yellow head. It came with the blacksmith shop. I think it's supposed to be a squash, but I kind of liked the idea of this. I read a lot of your guys' comments from last week. And by the way, I got some great feedback on these Nimbus Commandos. I'm glad you guys like them so far. I like the idea of the Doctor Strange cape, and I think there was someone who suggested maybe a non-neon color. And I like that because typically, you know, a neon Lego piece looks cooler and lights up better, but that's only if it's being lit up. And because these neon red heads or trans red heads are in these helmets, there's no light getting into them, so it basically just looks black. So I needed something that had its own color and didn't need light to be seen, so I decided to go with just like a solid color. And right now I picked yellow. Let me know what you guys think about that down below in the comments. It almost makes me think of like a Lego head turned backwards, but I do kind of like it. It helps that visor light up and pop better. And while I've got these commandos out, I wanted to show you guys the backpacks in a little bit better detail and show you why I went with this design. So that's what the backpack looks like. You can see there's like this roundish canister thing on one side and then an antenna sticking out on the top. It's kind of where I got the idea for this. You can see I've got the antenna sticking out right here, and I know this isn't so much like a canister looking thing. I know this doesn't look a whole lot like a canister, but I did like the vents on the back. I feel like it just gives it a cool military backpack vibe. Another thing I was thinking of using would be maybe something like this, because this is shaped a little bit, it's a little bit more rounded or at least angled on the sides and tops, so maybe it would look a little bit more like a canister. I don't know, let me know what you guys think would look better on the back of the backpack. That's pretty much everything I have to show you guys right now. It's time to get back to work. Here's the last update for the week, and you can see I got a decent amount of the rock work done, more than I anticipated doing. I thought I was just going to do a little bit then stop, but I actually really just started to enjoy doing it. I like rock work. It's giving me it's giving me some flashbacks to Kato Nemoidia and Utapau. I feel like I've just been pulling the same bins out over and over again for years, but all in all, I like what I see here. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier with building in sections. I like to build up to a certain height, and then that way I can see how it looks and copy those same patterns as I go along, instead of just like if I were to build, only this tall but build across the entire base of the MOC, I wouldn't really know like, okay, is this going to look good when I put 3 more levels on top of it, or the patterns and the shape's not really going to match. So it's nice to have kind of a taller section done first to see how all the shapes end up looking after a little while, and then I can figure out what I like and don't like, and I can use that for different sections of the MOC. As far as the height goes, I don't plan on building much higher than this, maybe to about right there. Mainly because, I don't want this to be a giant Utapau. And the height is mainly just to help raise up this MOC and just do something a little bit different. And so I just want the ravine back here to be a fair amount lower than up here. I want it to be tall enough that soldiers have to like climb and maybe put like some kind of rope ladder over here to be able to scale this cliff wall. I didn't want it to be like a little ditch, that they could kind of hop out of pretty easily. So that wraps up this week of building the Battle of Jabiim. I'm so happy to finally have this shape all figured out. I feel like I feel much more motivated to work on it. That was honestly a big block for me. There are, certain things when building a MOC that I really put off. And one of them is kind of like the base, especially when it's freeform. That dictates so much of what the rest of the MOC is going to look like. It's kind of a big deal. And so my inner perfectionist puts it off because, I want to build and design the perfect MOC base. But sometimes it's better just to start, because then from there you can kind of work and see what you like, see what you don't like. And at that point, you've already started on the project, which sometimes is the hardest part. Time to hit the outro. I hope you guys enjoyed this week of building Jabiim. This was a very successful week. The base is now done, and I've already started to get an idea of what I want the rock work to look like. I'm thinking about actually doing 2 different styles of rock work. So the back is going to be more flat cliff-like, kind of like what you saw on Kato Nemoidia, because I like to imagine that ravine that's going to be on the side of the MOC, that's little kind of valley area I was talking about. I imagine that kind of running around the back of the MOC. So I want to create like a little hill or natural defense, because it would make sense to me that that's where you would put your base. And so I want to have the clone base kind of on the top of this little hill, and the front side is going to be a little bit more sloped and a little bit more hill-like. I'm excited to do this because I think it'll look cool and it'll help me practice my hill-like rock work, because I tend to do cliff-like stuff more often. All that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll get back to more Jabiim action next week. I'm going to be working on the ravine and doing some more cliff work and figure out if and then figuring out how exactly and if I can fit an ATT in the mock. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to let me know what you thought about this episode down below in the comments, and I will catch you next time. But until then, happy building.